So thank you everybody for joining me today. This is our talk about Hinamatsuri, or Girls' Day in Japan. And this is part of our Textile of the Month series of just doing all sorts of Japanese topics related to textiles and Japanese culture. Let me charge in right away with the video and we'll get started. Girls' Day originally wasn't a holiday. It starts out, we think of Girls' Day as having the hina dolls. And the term hina actually doesn't mean doll. If you look in a dictionary, what it will say is, it'll say chick, as in baby chicken, and it might say doll, but most likely it'll say small. So normally in the dictionary, the term doll isn't directly associated with it. But if you go back even beyond that meaning of small, what it actually means is charm or talisman or something that protects you. And those talismans come in many different forms. On the left, you see a musubi bina type of doll, mame bina, which are made from little soybeans, hitogata, which are the oldest kind, and katashiro, which are the ones on the right for the paper. So let's start with hitogata and katashiro. Those are the very oldest type, but they are still in use. So in modern times, normally what a person would do is they would write their name, their date of birth, male or female, and the type of request and such that they might have, and write that out on this type of a doll. Now, a man's will be white and a woman's will be red in many traditions. Now, the backside of hers that you don't see there is red. This particular woman is using an all-white one. Now, once you have that filled out to indicate this is going to be your proxy, this doll is representing you, then as you see here, she's rubbing it over her head, over her shoulders, over her chest, over different parts of her body that might be ailing or that she wants to protect. And so once she sort of covered all the bases, meaning she's transferring any ills or even potential ills to this proxy, this talisman, then she's going to go ahead and get rid of it. She's going to send it away with all of these potential harms. And she's even breathing into it to share any internal problems. That goes into an envelope supplied by the shrine. And that then gets mailed back to the shrine or delivered in person. Now, once that's done, here these people are delivering it in person, the priest of the shrine is collecting all of those, taking them into the intersection of the shrine. They will basically bless them, so to speak, or cast out the bad tidings that they carry. And then as a further means of cleansing, what they'll do is throw them into the water. Water is considered a very cleansing medium. Fire is also considered very cleansing. So as these katashiro, as these hina, old hina dolls, are carrying away everything you've transferred to it, you'll stay healthy. And so the idea is this is a protection for you. It's a talisman. The idea is that it will take into itself the burden of whatever evil may befall you. Okay, so your house is going to catch on fire. Oh, this guy's protecting you. Going to break a leg. This guy's protecting you. Going to catch a cold. This guy's protecting you. But they do get used up. They get so full of all of these harms they've protected you from that they stop working. That's when you get a cold. That's when your house burns down. And that's when you get a broken leg, because it was working up to all that point, all that time you didn't have a broken leg. But now that you have one, obviously it's full and you need a new one. Okay, so that's sort of how it works. So you want to get rid of its fullness. You want to get rid of everything that it's contained, this vessel for bad tidings, and either cleanse it with water or burn it. So in the old days, pretty much things were divided between something that happens to us and being well. So there wasn't a great deal of distinction made between illness and any other calamity. And that's why this sort of protected you. Now, very often that's associated with a house and kept in the household shrine, in the kamidana, or it started to be carried about the person just to make sure it was on duty all the time. And with that in mind, people began to decorate it. So this little red one you see in the middle is called mame bina, which means bean hina. And usually what you'll do is take a soybean and wrap it in paper. and that's good enough. But the next level up is to wrap it in silk, and the next level up is to paint faces on the beans. And gradually, these improvements became more and more elaborate until you have the dolls that we have today, what we think of as the Girls' Day dolls. So this is another version of this Mame Bina. Here you have the soybean wrapped in paper, sumi, eyes and such painted on it, and then clothed, okay? Yet a slightly more elaborate version is to take this type, which is sometimes called a sarubobo in modern times. Think of those little tiny dolls that go all the way around a Chinese pincushion. Does it look familiar? Okay, that's the same kind of doll. And so this doll's much larger, of course. This would be something that you, while small, could be carried around you, but they also started to make them larger and larger as household decorations. There's another type that was made out of the, you can see the head harkens back to that bean type of approach, but it's actually much larger, and it's made with these cross sticks. Quite often a prayer or a prescription, if you want to call it that, was around the base. And these too became dressed and more elaborate and larger over time. So eventually we get to the point where we think of what we think of as Girls' Day dolls today, the Prince and Princess, and these are simply mutations, more elaborately developed versions of that exactly the same Hitogata or Katashiro or the other dolls we saw just a moment ago. So, so in modern times with coronavirus, whoops, let me back up just a speck here. Sorry about that. So with the coronavirus, there was even the version of the doll wearing the mask, just to be on the safe side, okay? And of course, that was to help popularize the idea of wearing masks. So this purification that we saw with the paper ones earlier isn't limited to the paper. It's still carried through to modern times. Usually, I'm going to stop for here just a second. Usually in Japan, in the old days, you couldn't buy used dolls, not really. Antique dealers didn't really sell them. The idea is that this doll is a hina. And the dolls are precious to the household. They're associated with the household. A woman would not normally get rid of her dolls any sooner than she would get rid of her kimono, or if it were here, like a wedding band or precious, household item. You only do that when you fall on hard times. Well, if you've fallen on hard times, that doll's not doing its job anymore. And if the doll's used up, you certainly don't want to give it to somebody else. Or as an outsider, you do not want to go to a pawn shop and buy somebody else's ill fortune. Okay, so traditionally dolls, and actually clothing for that matter too, weren't resold except under very desperate circumstances. So even today, people will often not pass on their dolls, or if they're moving and they're getting rid of them, they don't just give them away or turn them over to Salvation Army like we might. They burn them for exactly the same reasons that the older ones were burned. Or they'll turn around and water purify them. And so here you see hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these dolls that people have turned in. In this case, it's to a shrine, but they've turned them into the temple. They're being put on these boats, and they're going to be water purified by floating them away, and with them all the ill fortune that they've collected. And they're sprinkling paper now. Paper, again, is a clean, pure paper, is a purifying element. And here we have our hardy volunteers carrying the boats. You can see it's really quite laden with the dolls. Okay, and they get carried out to sea. I know this is still practiced because actually a friend of mine was moving recently and her family was getting rid of their dolls. And I actually wanted them. They were very nice dolls, but they weren't offered to me. She just mentioned casually they were taking them to the temple to burn. And so it wasn't my place to say, oh, give them to me. But can you imagine, from my point of view, the incredible waste that's here with these exquisitely produced things? Has nothing to do with quality. It's not a question of just disposable items. These are really, often they're plastic too, but I mean, they're exquisite pieces of art that are simply trashed, not trashed, that are purified in this way. And so this is an example of those same paper images we saw at the beginning being burned in this case, rather than sent away to the waters. And this is a Shinto priest doing that. So let's take a look at how some of these dolls are made, the modern one, modern meaning the more recent elaborate ones. So here what he's doing is taking powdered seashell, okay, and he's mixing that with a gelatin mixture called nikawa. The shell is called gohun. So gohun and nikawa are mixed to make a plaster, like a very high quality plaster, but a plaster nonetheless. And this is going to be applied to the surface of the doll face. So a lot of times we'll talk about a porcelain Japanese doll. Now, some dolls are porcelain, okay, but the majority of them that we call porcelain Japanese dolls are not porcelain at all. It's a shell mixture. And that's important because I've seen people go and try and wash a little dust or something off the face of the doll, and not being porcelain, you can't wash it. I've even seen antique dealers go to wash it and get it wet and have the nose fall off and be horrified because it's not porcelain, okay? So here you see he's prepared his gofun and nikawa mixture. These are hand-blown glass eyes that have been painted from the reverse side. And he's going to, this originally was generally the kind of doll making that I was trained in when I first went to Japan. And so he's going to now put some more of the gohun mixture to fill in the cavity of the eye. The doll head in this case, they're often carved by wood, fully wood, but this is made with paulownia tree sawdust and is a composite, which is also still very good quality doll. The eyeballs are inserted. Keep them from being cross-eyed here. And then he's going to go ahead and apply, as he builds up enough inventory, going to go ahead and apply the shell to the entire face. So you notice how rough some of the shape of the wood, the seam line was showing on the composite. That's really not going to be an issue because many, many layers of this gofun mixture will be built up, and that'll gloss over some of the initial irregularities. The very highest quality, often very old dolls, are the ones with actually the very, very shiniest faces, because the shiny gofun is the hardest to apply. You'll notice in just a moment as he's moving along and this plaster mixture, this gofun, starts to dry a little bit, set up. There'll be little bubble marks, basically zits, okay? That's not good on the doll. You really don't want that. So the more gelatin there is in the mixture, the more likely bubbles are to occur. And therefore, the more skill it requires. So the more shiny the surface of the skin, the more difficult it is to apply without problems, and that shows the skill of the artist. So again, when you're looking for this kind of doll, especially antiques, do know that the shiniest face is the best quality. And now here you can see him building up additional details with thickened shell. You can build up the lips, you can build up the ear. So notice how crude the ear shape is here, but the finished one will be quite refined because he'll be drawing in the extra details with this extra plaster. And that's how you get a little bit of personality added to each one too. This is good quality, as I mentioned, with the composite, but the best quality always is solid wood. One danger of this type of doll with the composite is that it can get meal bugs. They'll go in and eat the rice glue that's holding the sawdust together, and that can be a problem. It's a problem in Japan. It's certainly a problem in the West. Going back in and carving in a few more details. If you want to try your hand at this, I'll mention that he is carving it while it's ever so slightly damp. It's much easier to carve the plaster at that stage. And the very last stage of the carving is what they call is opening the eyes. That's when the doll starts to come alive. There are dolls with hand-painted eyes, of course, rather than the glass. The glass are considered better quality. So now he has two of them side by side. You can see slight differences in them. but the ears have been defined, the eyes have been defined, everything is softened up, the eyes are open. And then, of course, one of the last details is to go in and paint in the facial features. Now, after all of that's done, the face is done, etc., then he'll go back and basically carve the outline of the hair, as you see here, and then silk hair will be added. In the old days, human hair was also used, but most commonly silk is used nowadays. Notice the very fine brush. For those of you doing the dye work, this is the same menso brush that we use for some of our dye work. And then that last little bit of red to the lips. Okay, we're good to go. So he's got his whole lineup of his princess dolls here. And of course, the same thing would be done for the male doll. And so in the end, we wind up with something along this line of the traditional hinadan, the stair-stepping of dolls, with the prince and the princess at the top. Below that are the three ladies in waiting. Then we have the five musicians and the old warrior and the young warrior. Okay. Now, one thing, let me back up just a minute. I'm not sure if you can quite tell this looking at this doll, but this one is plastic. Okay, the face is plastic and the hands are plastic. So if you look at the detailing in the hands, they have little fingernails and things. And this is a nice quality doll. It's a fairly expensive doll, but again, be very careful to take note of whether it's that shell mixture, which is considerably better quality than the plastic head. Most often nowadays, you're going to come across plastic. So if you're looking for antique ones in particular, really take note of the flesh. It's the head that determines the value. Then I wanted to share this kindergarten class of kids reenacting the Hina festival, our little warrior and then the young princess and princess just a moment ago. It just looked really sweet. So of course, this is something that the kindergarten classes would do on the 3rd of May, on 3rd of March, excuse me, today, to celebrate Girls' Day. So hearkening way back again to the very first dolls we covered, this is an origami version of them. This is a set that I've made, and they still have that same hierarchy. So there's the princess and the prince, the three ladies in waiting, the five musicians, the three attendants, and then the young warrior and the old warrior. So the question also often comes up, does the prince go on the right or the left? Does the princess go on the right or the left? And the answer is yes, it goes on the right or the left. Both are correct. You see it on display both ways. I've asked all sorts of doll experts, and in the end, they say, yes, it's one or the other. Okay, so don't give it too much worry. Going back to the dolls that we let go in the water, to send something off in the water, the verb is nagasu. And so these are called Nagashi Bina. Nagashi Bina is the hina doll that you float away. So in this case, for a children's class years ago, I did a really simple doll. These are just used chopsticks, waribashi. And then the heads are made from what McDonald's had at that time were coffee stirring spoons. And so let me just show you a back view of this. So we just went and got a whole bunch of spoons, painted the faces on it, folded origami really simply, and then took them to the river and floated them away later. Nowadays, you wouldn't want to do that, throwing the plastic in the river, of course. So what you just saw was the back of that spoon. And now here you see the Shinto priest letting Nagashi Bina flow away in the river. Actually, I think this is a nicely designed little stream, obviously artificial, but it allows all of the kids standing around to watch their particular doll meander down the stream. In this case, what the kids have done is drawn their picture of the doll on the paper and send it off. So any version works, as long as, and they've put them on, of course, little plastic plates, but anything like that, nagasu is to float the doll down the stream. So taking a look at some other variations, this would be used on a Shinto family shrine, can be used for that, but it's still the same thing. They're two. As long as you have two of something, complements, then it's always a complete hina set. Hina does not have to be a prince and a princess. You saw that earlier with some of the paper things. It can be two beans. You know, you can have a kidney bean and a northern bean or something, a white bean, and that makes a set if that's what you want to put on display. And I have several other samples here. This is a shell doll that I made many, many years ago. And in this case, I took the leftover shells from dinner, the soup that we had, and made them into the dolls by building up layers of the powdered seashell, as he did with the doll. And then I took some Pismo beach clams that I found just on the shore, and also sculpted additional powdered seashell on top of that to make two folding screens that would then go together and house the other clamshell dolls inside as my hina set. And the character on it says hina. Another set that I made maybe 50 years ago, it's a set of egg dolls. So they're made with chicken eggs. The chicken egg now isn't just the egg that would break very easily. So the inside is lined and the outer section is coated with many layers of that same powdered seashell and gelatin mixture. Again, you can use anything to make these dolls. So in this case, it was a good excuse to go bar hopping and collect matches. In Japan, matches came in all different kinds of colors. And so collecting different colors from each different bar allowed me to collect a black match at one bar for the groom, for the prince, and the white one for the bride or the princess. And you have the baby blue ones here for the 3 male attendants. You have the dark blue on the left for the old warrior, along with the citron blossoms that are often associated with the stair steps. And then down below, you have the young warrior with the plum blossoms, which are in bloom just about this time. And then you have the 3 ladies in waiting and the musicians and so forth, okay? So all of those get pushed back into their matchbox, and the matchbox is stacked up and put in that case that you see. And this gives you a detail of that. Okay, so again, you can make it out of anything. A few other ideas. These are little soft sculpture ones out of kittens. They make a full set. Here we have a couple of building tools, okay? And what is that, deodorant or something? Right and left, okay? If that's what is important in your life, then this too is a complete set of Girls' Day dolls. You can see the 5 musicians down below. If you're into knots, if you're a sailor and make knots, or if you do mizuhiki knotting like this makes a complete doll set. Recognizable as a hina set. There are more contemporary ones that are a little bit more maybe even goth feeling or you know, arcane British feeling in their mood, or you can even make them out of desserts and sweets, as you see here. And then I have one more sample of that coming up as a prince and princess. Okay, so here you have the princess on the right and the prince on the left. So these are quite edible, and they would be hot sellers on a day like today. Very modern versions, plastic versions, affordable versions for apartment dwellers. These are easily packed away, complete set. As long as you have the prince and the princess, it's complete. 2 foxes. Okay, so again, hearkening back to a Shinto fox in that case, a very clever use. This is one I like also. This is done with cutting out a laser cutter, obviously, fake wood, and it gives a very clear, very easy thing, something that somebody could have make with their computer help, okay? And again, the similar type thing out of dogs. And look at the screen in the back is a set of dog ears, a very clever design. You have more Western looking ones. I especially like the leopard print, matching leopard print on Prince and Princess. And that's quite a hairdo she has going there. And then, of course, we can't forget Mickey and Minnie. I'd kind of like to see a Popeye and olive oil one as well, maybe. Okay. So it's whatever your imagination allows you. It can be blown glass, often perfume bottles or whiskey bottles are sold this way in terms of a prince and princess set just for today. And then I'm ending with this one that a young student of mine made for Girls' Day, but she chose to make an image of herself, the little girl, and her grandmother. And so it's a very, very charming set. And she just used whatever scraps of fabric she had around her. I thought it was very clever. She unwove the fabric to make her own hair, and then she found a bit of fluff for her grandma's hair. So a very sweet way to end the idea of the Girls' Day dolls continuing generation after generation after generation. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed today's talk. I appreciate you all joining me. Feel free to check out the classes online. I do teach Girls' Day dolls and charms and things like that in a more expanded version. And thank you again. I'll post this on YouTube shortly. Okay, bye-bye. Okay, so you can all come back on.